You're nothing without me. You think you're better or you can do anything without me? No, I don't think so.
He grabbed her wrist before she could step away. You're nothing without me. His voice cut through the glow of the luxury mall entrance like shattered glass. People turned. The revolving doors behind them kept spinning. Light spilled out onto the polished marble floor. The gold letters above the entrance shimmered under the evening lights. Expensive perfume lingered in the air. High heels clicked. Shopping bags rustled. And in the middle of it all, he was yelling. She didn't pull away immediately. Not because she couldn't. Because she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Her red satin dress caught the light. Deep. Elegant. Unapologetic. The thin straps rested against her shoulders like quiet confidence. A single tear slipped down her cheek, slow and deliberate, but her chin stayed lifted. You think you're better than me now? He snapped. His gray tailored jacket fit perfectly. Crisp white shirt. Expensive watch flashing under the lights as he pointed a finger inches from her face. You were nothing before I met you. A small crowd began to form. A couple paused near the glass doors. Two teenage girls stopped mid-step, whispering. A security guard near the pillar shifted his weight, but didn't move yet. She inhaled slowly. Her fingers curled, but she didn't speak. That made him angrier. Look at me when I'm talking to you, he shouted. His voice echoed against the high glass panels of the entrance. Heads turned from inside the mall now. People exiting slowed down. The humiliation wasn't private anymore. It was a spectacle. Her eyes met his. Not weak. Not pleading. Just tired. He leaned closer. You think these dresses make you important? He laughed bitterly. You're still the same girl who needed me to survive. Another tear fell, but her posture never changed. That confused him. He expected shouting, crying, begging, something. Instead, silence. And silence in front of an audience can feel louder than screaming. A man walking past slowed, pretending to check his phone while watching. A woman shook her head disapprovingly. Someone quietly began recording. He didn't notice. He was too busy trying to win. You built nothing, he continued. Everything you are is because of me. The words hung in the air. Cruel. Calculated. Designed to shrink her. For a second, the world felt smaller around her. The lights too bright. The marble floor too reflective. Every pair of eyes pressing against her skin. But she didn't shrink. She straightened. That small movement, barely visible, made his jaw tighten. You don't get to walk away from me, he said, voice lowering now, more dangerous. Not after everything I did for you. She gently pulled her wrist free. The gesture was controlled, measured, final. Gasps rippled softly through the onlookers. His face flushed. Oh, so now you're too good to respond, he snapped. The revolving glass doors behind them turned again. Soft footsteps followed, but he didn't hear them. He took a step closer instead, invading her space again. Say something, he demanded. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, there was no fear in her eyes. Only clarity. I don't owe you anything, she said quietly. The words weren't loud, but they carried. Something shifted, a subtle change in the atmosphere. The security guard near the pillar straightened fully now. The murmurs from the crowd softened. He laughed sharply. You don't owe me, he scoffed. Without me, you'd still be struggling. You think anyone would even notice you? He spread his arms dramatically, gesturing to the people watching. Look around. You're nothing without me. The sentence landed harder this time. It echoed. Even the revolving doors seemed to slow. Her breathing steadied. Her hands stopped trembling. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't look at the security. She didn't look back toward the entrance. But someone behind her was watching every second. Still, silent, measured. The polished floor reflected a pair of black shoes stepping forward from the glow of the glass doors. Expensive, controlled, unhurried. A white blazer caught the light briefly before disappearing into shadow again. Two men in dark suits lingered several steps behind, but the one in front. He stopped, not close enough to interrupt, not far enough to ignore, just watching. The ex didn't notice. He was too consumed by his own voice. You'll come crawling back, he continued, leaning in again. You always do. She didn't respond, and that silence began to feel different now. Not weak, not empty, weighted. The crowd felt it. The guard felt it. The air felt heavier. The man behind them adjusted his cufflink. Slowly, deliberately, he tilted his head slightly, studying, assessing. The ex scoffed again. Answer me, he barked. She finally turned her head. Not toward him, toward the faint reflection in the glass doors behind him. And her expression changed. Just slightly. Not shock. Not fear. Recognition. He mistook it for submission. That's right, he smirked. You remember who built you. The man behind them took one more step forward. His presence alone seemed to quiet the space. The revolving doors stopped spinning. Even the whispers faded. But the ex kept talking, kept pushing, kept humiliating himself. You're nothing without me, he repeated, louder this time. The words echoed one last time against the towering glass. And then, a calm voice, low and controlled, finally cut through the night air. Let go. The ex froze. Not because he understood, but because something in that tone didn't ask. It commanded. Slowly, very slowly, he began to turn around. But he didn't know who he was about to face. He didn't know what name the mall security whispered under their breath. He didn't know why the crowd had suddenly gone silent. He didn't know why her tears had stopped. He didn't know why the air felt different. He didn't know why the confidence in his chest was beginning to crack. Because in that moment, he was still convinced he was in control. But he didn't know who had just stepped out behind him. The presence behind her was calm, silent, yet undeniably commanding. Every detail of him, the slow adjustment of his cufflinks, the measured tilt of his head, radiated authority. She felt it more than she saw it. Every step he took toward them made the ex stumble slightly, though he didn't notice. Confidence faltered beneath the weight of a gaze that spoke volumes without a word. Her ex's voice cracked, a sudden tremor he tried to hide with louder aggression. You'll always need me, he shouted again, desperate to reclaim the illusion of control. No one will ever notice you without me. She remained still, not intimidated, not submissive, calm, observant. Every muscle relaxed, but every sense alert. Years of manipulation had taught her patience. Every outburst he had thrown at her before had been predictable. Every gesture, every phrase, every sharp tone she had catalogued. And now, it was all useful. A subtle shift in the mall air seemed to ripple across the polished floors. Shoppers whispered and turned discreetly, their attention drawn not to her vulnerability, but to the tension she exuded. Her gaze met theirs briefly, steady, unflinching. They saw dignity. They saw strength. They saw a woman no longer defined by anyone else's shadow. If you're already on edge wondering how she'll face this, don't forget to subscribe to Ari Love Beyond, because what happens next will change everything. Her ex leaned closer, voice rising, the desperation bleeding through his controlled arrogance. You'll always be mine. His wrist twitched, a hand subconsciously reaching toward her, as though proximity could reassert his influence. You can pretend all you want, but you're nothing without me. The words were meant to cut, but she was beyond the girl who once shrank at his accusations. She straightened imperceptibly, the red satin of her dress catching the ambient light in a way that seemed almost deliberate, as if she was claiming the space she had built, her every movement radiating silent defiance. Memories flickered through her mind, not indulgent nostalgia, but evidence of the battles she had won quietly, away from his notice. Nights she had lain awake, heart pounding, planning her escape not from the world, but from his suffocating expectations. Days spent building small victories, a promotion ignored, a skill refined, friendships nurtured in secret. Each act invisible, yet each a brick in the fortress of her independence. And now, she was here, standing tall in front of him, the mall lights reflecting a story of survival, endurance, and subtle reclamation. You think you've built something? He spat. A life without me? A career without me? A smile that's yours alone? He leaned dangerously close, chest nearly brushing hers, his breath sharp, his words acidic. It doesn't belong to you. She exhaled, slow and deliberate, letting the space between them stretch. Each pause spoke louder than any words could. She didn't need to defend herself. She didn't need to argue. Silence, calmness, observation, that was her counterattack. The subtle movements behind her, the silent presence of the man in the white blazer, didn't escape her notice. She didn't turn, didn't acknowledge him outright, but she felt the balance of power shift imperceptibly. It was like the room had contracted around the ex, compressing his confidence, making his aggression seem theatrical and hollow. You'll never be free of me, he said, frustration tipping into fear he refused to recognize. No matter what you do, you're mine. Her hands relaxed at her sides, releasing tension she had carried for years. Calm, precise. She let him expose himself completely. The cracks in his composure, the tremor in his hands, the involuntary tightening of his jaw. Every detail he believed unnoticed was catalogued, remembered, and silently wielded. And then she let her eyes flick toward the entrance. Not fully, just enough to acknowledge the subtle presence of someone whose authority outweighed his bravado entirely. Every calculated step he took, every measured glance, made the ex flinch in a way he couldn't identify yet. "You think you're strong," he continued, voice rising, pitched with desperation. "You think you can walk away and make it without me?" She raised her chin, heart steady, pulse measured, as if the question was absurd. A faint smile touched the corner of her lips. Not mocking, not cruel, but reflective of the quiet victory she had earned over years of manipulation. The mall murmurs grew. A security guard shifted from the pillar, eyes scanning, sensing the tension without understanding the history. Bystanders whispered, lifted cameras discreetly, recording fragments of a confrontation whose true stakes remained invisible to them. If you want to see every shocking twist unfold from here, make sure to turn on notifications for Ari Love Beyond. This is only just beginning. He waved a hand, a gesture meant to assert dominance over her and the onlookers alike. "Look at yourself," he shouted. "Do you think any of this belongs to you? You are nothing without me." The words rang across the marble floors, but the echo bounced back strangely, swallowed by the presence behind her. The man in the white blazer didn't move yet. He didn't need to. The shift in energy was enough. Confidence drained from the ex like water from a cracked vessel, subtle but undeniable. She remembered vividly the nights she had cried silently, plotting her reclamation. Every small victory now culminated in this moment. Her posture, her calm, her refusal to react. Each second he wasted attempting to intimidate her was a second, reinforcing her triumph. "You still belong to me," he yelled again, leaning in, almost grotesque in his display. "You can't pretend otherwise." But she didn't flinch, didn't even blink nervously. She let him see what she had become, a woman who had endured, who had strategized, who had rebuilt, and who now stood unbroken. Behind her, the subtle step forward of the observer remained imperceptible to him. Calm, deliberate, calculated. Watching, waiting. Not a single word. Not yet. But the atmosphere had shifted. He was no longer the center of attention. The balance of power had quietly, irrevocably, tilted. Her ex's chest heaved. Sweat pricked his brow. His words faltered slightly as he scanned the crowd, searching for validation, for witnesses who would confirm his authority. There were none. Only her, steady, untouchable, and the presence he couldn't see. And in that moment, as he prepared to lash out once more, to remind her of the control he believed he wielded, she straightened fully, shoulders back, chin lifted. Her eyes, unwavering, met his. Calm, defiant, unyielding. He still thought he owned her. He still thought she needed him. But he didn't know who had just stepped out behind him. The ex's voice rose again, louder this time, straining to reclaim the control he believed he had lost. "Do you think anyone will take you seriously without me?" he demanded, each word sharp as a knife, slicing through the soft hum of the mall evening. "You're nothing. Nothing at all." People began to glance over. A mother with a stroller paused, eyes darting between them. A businessman lowered his phone, momentarily distracted from his call, sensing the tension but unaware of the history. A small group of teenagers whispered, leaning closer to catch the words, their curiosity piqued by the drama unfolding in the entrance's glowing light. She remained still, arms at her sides, chest calm, but every sense alert. Each movement, each inflection of his voice, was catalogued in her mind, parsed carefully. She had learned long ago that aggression revealed more than any confession ever could. His desperation, the faltering confidence in his stance, the tremor in his hands. All of it was visible if she simply observed. "You'll always belong to me," he shouted, gesturing theatrically to the crowd, as if trying to stake a claim not just over her, but over the witnesses themselves. "Do you understand? You are nothing without me." The words echoed, bouncing off the glass, reverberating through the polished marble floors, amplified by the grandeur of the mall. People shifted, some with discomfort, some with curiosity, some instinctively taking sides without realizing it. A few lifted their phones, silent witnesses to the unfolding spectacle. Her lips pressed together. She didn't need to respond. The silence itself became a weapon, a mirror reflecting the hollowness of his threats. Every pause, every measured breath, amplified the tension in a way that words never could. If you want to see exactly how she handles this and turns the tables, make sure to subscribe to Ari Love Beyond. The twists you'll witness are unforgettable. The ex stepped closer. But something had changed. His aggression no longer carried the weight it had before. His threats seemed smaller, less certain, less credible. Her eyes flicked toward the shadow, noting the subtle authority, the poised dominance, the calm energy that contrasted sharply with his desperation. The crowd's murmurs intensified. Whispers carried a new undertone, curiosity mixed with awe. Something was happening, something beyond his control, something that the ex could not yet comprehend. The mall lights reflected off the polished floors, mirroring the tension in fractured patterns. Each movement, each gesture, each breath seemed magnified in the crowded corridor. Her posture remained perfect. Her calm, deliberate breathing, her unwavering gaze, her poised elegance. Each element communicated strength, resilience, and quiet dominance. And just as he prepared to raise his voice again, to assert control that had already begun slipping through his fingers, a ripple of change brushed through the space. The subtle presence behind her had shifted fully into awareness, radiating authority, presence, and a promise of action. It was a change the ex could not measure, could not see, could not anticipate. And in that instant, everything shifted. Her composure contrasted sharply with his flailing theatrics, and the disparity was visible to anyone watching. A small group of shoppers had stopped mid-step, phones poised, recording snippets of the confrontation. Some whispered, "Who are they?" Or "Is he crazy?" Others glanced around, uncertainty in their expressions. The crowd's curiosity amplified the ex's humiliation without him realizing it. Her mind drifted briefly, recalling the countless hours of silent training in patience, observation, and strategy. The nights she had endured his manipulations, the days she had planned her quiet victories. Each small act building the foundation for this moment. Every tear shed, every insult endured, every invisible triumph now converged in a single display of resilience and poise. He stomped a foot, his voice cracking under the strain of trying to assert dominance. "Do you hear me? You're nothing without me." Her silence remained unbroken. The stillness drew attention to itself, forcing the crowd to lean in, to watch, to measure the imbalance that neither of them fully understood. The man in the white blazer stepped slightly further forward, deliberate and calculated. His presence didn't announce itself with sound or motion. Instead, it reshaped the energy in the corridor. Every word the ex yelled seemed smaller, less significant, less threatening in comparison to the quiet dominance now quietly asserting itself. The ex waved his hands, flailing in an almost frantic attempt to reclaim attention. "I've done everything for you," he barked. "You owe me respect. You owe me recognition." The crowd murmured, some shifting uncomfortably. Others, without knowing why, turned their gaze toward the subtle figure behind her. The observer radiated authority without effort, control without demonstration, power without noise. Her chest rose and fell with deliberate calm. She let the tension stretch, let the absurdity of his aggression become apparent not just to him, but to everyone watching. He was performing for the wrong audience, and she was the center of her own stage now. If you're captivated by this tension, turn on notifications for Ari Love Beyond. You won't want to miss how every move she makes changes the game. He pointed a finger, trembling slightly now, at her chest. "You'll always need me," he shouted, but the words rang hollow. The crowd's attention, the subtle but undeniable presence behind her, the unwavering composure she displayed, all of it stripped the potency from his threats. A small child clutched her mother's hand, eyes wide, sensing the drama. A couple of teenagers exchanged glances, whispering hurriedly, snapping photos. Security officers adjusted posture subtly, sensing that the situation had escalated beyond ordinary. She allowed herself a fraction of a smile, quiet, almost imperceptible, but filled with controlled triumph. Her hands relaxed fully, resting calmly at her sides. Every step, every glance, every beat of her pulse was deliberate. The ex, oblivious to the silent calculations around him, tried one final display of dominance. You think you can walk away from me? You'll regret it. A murmur of anticipation ran through the crowd. Phones were lifted higher. Observers leaned subtly closer. The mall seemed to contract around the three figures, concentrating the tension. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, the presence behind her, the man in the white blazer, shifted. One deliberate step, a tilt of the head, a calm, measured glance that seemed to weigh the entire scene in a single sweep. The air itself seemed heavier, tighter, sharper. The ex, unaware of the observer's influence, continued shouting. You are nothing. Hear me? Nothing. But something had changed. His aggression no longer carried the weight it had before. His threat seemed smaller, less certain, less credible. Her eyes flicked toward the shadow, noting the subtle authority, the poised dominance, the calm energy that contrasted sharply with his desperation. The crowd's murmurs intensified. Whispers carried a new undertone, curiosity mixed with awe. Something was happening, something beyond his control, something that the ex could not yet comprehend. The mall lights reflected off the polished floors, mirroring the tension in fractured patterns. Each movement, each gesture, each breath seemed magnified in the crowded corridor. Her posture remained perfect. Her calm, deliberate breathing, her unwavering gaze, her poised elegance. Each element communicated strength, resilience, and quiet dominance. And just as he prepared to raise his voice again, to assert control that had already begun slipping through his fingers, a ripple of change brushed through the space. The subtle presence behind her had shifted fully into awareness, radiating authority, presence, and a promise of action. It was a change the ex could not measure, could not see, could not anticipate. And in that instant, everything shifted. The mall corridor seemed to shrink around the three of them. The ex, red-faced and frantic, continued shouting, desperate to reclaim some semblance of dominance, unaware that his performance was now being measured against a presence far more imposing than he could comprehend. From the revolving doors, the figure stepped forward, every movement deliberate, slow, and precise. Dark hair slicked back, sharp eyes scanning the scene without a hint of emotion. The white blazer caught the light, contrasting sharply against the shadowed corridor, an understated announcement of authority. No one could mistake the aura of control that radiated from him. People instinctively shifted. The crowd, previously hovering at a cautious distance, began to part slightly, sensing the energy in the room change. Whispers spread through the onlookers, subtle yet tangible. The mall itself seemed to pause, the usual hum of footsteps and conversation fading beneath the quiet dominance emanating from the newcomer. The ex continued, oblivious to the shift. Do you hear me? He bellowed, pointing aggressively toward her. You'll never escape me. You're nothing without me. He stopped just short of her, chest still puffed, hands waving for emphasis. Every desperate gesture only highlighted the contrast between his chaotic energy and the calm presence observing him. The figure took another slow step forward. Not a word, not a gesture, not a hint of hurry. Yet every inch he closed created tension that the ex could feel in the pit of his stomach, even if he didn't recognize it. The air thickened. The polished marble floor reflected a new reality. The ex was no longer the center of the scene. He was simply part of it. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the observer, not openly acknowledging him, but recognizing the subtle shift in energy. That recognition alone caused a ripple through her own confidence. She had endured his cruelty for years, endured his attempts at control, but she had never felt this kind of protection or this kind of promise. The ex's confidence wavered, but he refused to notice it. You can't walk away from me, he shouted, his voice cracking. You'll regret it. The crowd shifted again. Phones were lifted, recording snippets, though few would understand the true gravity of what was unfolding. They saw shouting, they saw confrontation, but they couldn't yet perceive the undercurrent of power that had entered the room silently, like a shadow stretching across the polished floors. The man in the white blazer adjusted the cuff of his jacket, slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Every motion, though subtle, was heavy with intent. His eyes scanned the ex, noting his every micro-expression, every twitch, every imperfection. There was no hurry, No threat, just observation, and the calm that came with complete control. The ex, frustrated by the silence, tried again. I gave you everything. I built you up, he yelled. His words bounced off the glass, echoing through the corridor, but they seemed hollow now. His audience had subtly shifted. Where moments ago people had been drawn into his fury, now they were drawn to the quiet authority behind her. Her hands remained relaxed at her sides. Each measured breath, each controlled movement, reflected her own inner power. She had endured, observed, and survived this type of aggression countless times. Yet now, with the silent figure behind her, she felt an edge of anticipation. Something was about to tip, and she would witness it firsthand. The ex waved his arms wildly, attempting to dominate the space, to make it his again. You belong to me, he shouted, teeth clenched. Do you hear me? You're nothing. The figure took another step forward, slow, methodical. Not a single shopper moved closer. Some instinctively took a step back, others instinctively stopped mid-step, sensing the change in tension. The ex's gestures, once threatening, seemed almost comical now, juxtaposed against the composed authority silently measuring him from behind. A faint glimmer of recognition passed through her mind. She had seen control like this before, in fleeting moments during past encounters with people of true authority. But never like this. The sheer calm, the subtle awareness, the measured patience. It was overwhelming, even without a single word. The ex's voice cracked again. You'll never survive without me. The figure's eyes shifted slightly. No motion, no display, just an unblinking assessment. The ex felt it, though he didn't know what it was. A weight, a presence, the realization that someone else had taken the balance of power from him, and he didn't yet understand it. The crowd's whispers intensified. Eyes followed every step the observer took, even though few consciously recognized the significance. Something unspoken had taken root, something that the ex could not see, and yet it cut deeper than any insult or shouted accusation. She watched him, standing tall, poised, every inch controlled. Her hands lightly brushed the folds of her dress, as if grounding herself in the moment. She didn't need to speak. She didn't need to act. The presence behind her was enough to unsettle the ex, and the calm radiating from him infused her with a quiet strength she hadn't known she possessed in years. The ex moved again, leaning toward her aggressively, fists clenching. His voice trembled now, betraying the cracks forming in his carefully maintained ego. You think you're free. You think you can defy me. A shopper instinctively stepped back, bumping into a display stand. A quiet gasp passed through the crowd. Some people raised their phones, others simply froze. The tension was tangible, thick, almost visible in the air. The figure behind her shifted slightly, tilting his head just enough to signal observation. No one spoke, yet everyone could feel the change. Every movement of his shoulders, every careful step, exuded authority without effort, without noise. The ex's energy faltered in response, though he didn't recognize why. Her own breathing remained measured. Calm. She felt the shift and allowed it to anchor her own confidence. Every flinch, every gesture of fear, every attempted display of control from the ex now seemed ineffective. He was performing for an audience that no longer validated him. The ex's words grew frantic. You'll regret this. You're making a mistake. The silent observer stepped again, this time closer, a deliberate advance that did not break the tension but increased it. The mall seemed to contract around them, the sound of distant shoppers muted, the polished floors reflecting more than just light. They reflected the growing imbalance of power. The ex tried once more, pointing toward her chest, as if physically asserting ownership. You are mine. You hear me? Mine. The crowd's focus was subtly shifting. Some shoppers leaned closer, sensing the contrast in energy between the frantic ex and the calm authority behind her. A few murmured quietly, noting the tension, though none understood its depth. The ex's desperation, once commanding attention, was now overshadowed by quiet dominance. She raised her chin imperceptibly, shoulders back, every breath steady. Not because she felt secure, but because she had learned the strength of silence, the power of observation, and now, the presence of the figure behind her amplified that strength beyond anything she had known. The ex's voice faltered for a fraction of a second, just enough for a pause, for recognition to flicker that he was no longer in control, even if he didn't consciously admit it. He tried to shout over the growing silence, to reassert dominance. But the observer's calm energy, his measured, unhurried movements, made every word sound hollow, impotent. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the shadow, acknowledgement in a subtle glance. Not submission, not deference, just recognition. And with that acknowledgement, the ex's confidence waned, replaced by something unfamiliar, unease. He should have stopped talking. The observer stopped a few steps behind her, still not close enough to touch, yet close enough that every movement of his presence reverberated through the corridor. The ex continued shouting, voice cracking, hands waving, the anger dripping off him like sweat. "You think you're stronger than me," he bellowed, his face red, veins standing out along his neck. "You think you can walk away, do whatever you want without me?" For a moment, he thought he commanded the attention of everyone in the corridor, that the crowd and the lights and the polished floors belonged to his performance. He was wrong. The figure in the white blazer exhaled once. Not loudly, not theatrically, just a slow, deliberate exhale that seemed to still the space around him. The mall's ambient sounds, the low hum of shoppers, the soft clatter of carts, the distant elevator, faded into a quiet undercurrent. All eyes didn't know it yet, but the tide had shifted. Then he spoke, calm, measured, voice carrying without shouting. "Step back." The words were simple, not a threat, not a demand, just an assertion of fact. The ex froze mid-gesture. His finger pointed at her, a hand half raised, his mouth open as if he was about to shout again. And for the first time, he paused, not from fear, not from consideration, but from a subtle, primal recognition of authority he didn't understand. "You heard me," the man repeated, his eyes steady on the ex. Not rage, not anger, just a presence that commanded attention without needing volume. The ex laughed nervously, dismissing it at first. "And who are you supposed to be?" he sneered, though the quiver in his voice betrayed him. "You think you can stop me? You think you can interfere in what's mine?" A quiet ripple ran through the onlookers. A couple of shoppers glanced at one another, whispering under their breath. Something was off. Something invisible yet tangible had entered the space. The ex didn't notice. He was too consumed by his own ego, too invested in the performance of intimidation. From behind, a security officer straightened, stepping slightly closer, hand resting near his radio. A mall manager appeared at the top of the escalator, brow furrowed, scanning the scene, eyes narrowing at the tension building between the trio. He spoke quietly into his earpiece, alerting colleagues while keeping a discreet distance. The balance had shifted, though they didn't yet know who controlled it. The ex leaned forward aggressively, still trying to dominate, still believing himself untouchable. "You have no right to interfere. You don't even know her," he spat, trembling slightly now, his composure cracking under the weight of silent scrutiny. The man in the white blazer didn't respond immediately. He let the moment stretch. Every second, every pause, worked against the ex. The crowd sensed it. The stillness pressed down, making the ex's agitation seem louder than it was, more erratic, more fragile. Finally, the figure spoke again. Calmly, deliberately. "I know her well enough to ensure you don't forget who she is." The words landed like ice in the air. The ex faltered. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, searching for a retort, a rebuttal, anything to reclaim dominance. There was none. The words themselves weren't loud, but the weight behind them was unmistakable. A hush fell over the immediate area. Phones hovered, capturing snippets, but the real gravity of the moment was beyond their understanding. The mall lights, the polished floors, the reflective surfaces, they all served as silent witnesses to a shift the ex could not yet grasp. "Do you hear me?" the man continued, eyes fixed, not threatening, not aggressive, but undeniable in authority. "She is not yours. She never was." The ex laughed nervously, forcing it. "You think you can stop me?" he spat again. "You think." And then he stopped. Something in the man's posture, the subtle tightening of his jaw, the measured tilt of his head, conveyed an unspoken reality. This was not someone to be underestimated, not someone to dismiss. A small ripple of recognition passed through the security officers, though they did not yet intervene. The mall manager shifted again, scanning the surroundings, sensing a hierarchy forming without needing to know the names attached. The ex, still focused on trying to assert himself, failed to notice the subtle recalibration of power around him. The figure in the white blazer took a single step forward. Not hurried, not threatening, simply deliberate. The polished marble floor reflected his motion, drawing attention without overt action. Every observer, conscious or not, felt the energy shift. The X's gestures now appeared frantic, uncoordinated, desperate. "You presume to lecture her," the man said, his voice low, calm, unshakable. "And yet, you do not understand the consequences of your actions." A murmur passed through the crowd. Some whispered to each other, sensing a weight far beyond the surface conflict. The X waved his hands, trying to appear dominant, but the gesture seemed smaller, less significant. His confidence, once inflated and unyielding, was beginning to crack under the unseen pressure of true authority. Her chest rose and fell steadily. Shoulders back, chin lifted. She had endured every attempt at manipulation, every belittling remark, every attempt to control her life. She had survived, adapted, and now watched as the balance of power quietly realigned in the space around her. The X tried to step forward again, voice trembling, fury and panic mixed in a volatile cocktail. "You don't know who you're messing with." The man in the white blazer finally tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone made the X stumble. Words faltered on the tip of the X's tongue. His mind raced, trying to measure the authority standing behind her. But he had no reference, no frame of comparison. Then came the recognition. A brief flicker crossed the X's face, a micro-expression, almost imperceptible, but there. His confident mask cracked. His hands dropped slightly as understanding began to seep in. The name whispered through the corridors of his mind. The reputation attached. The power he had assumed was aligned with her weakness, now fully revealed. "You," he muttered, voice shaking, disbelief creeping in. "You're not just some you." The observer's calm gaze remained fixed on him, unmoved by the desperation, untouched by the chaos he tried to manufacture. The X realized he had miscalculated entirely, that the balance of power had not only shifted but had toppled entirely in favor of her and the quiet, deliberate force standing behind her. Her eyes, calm and unwavering, met his briefly. No words, no pleading, just quiet triumph. And in that brief exchange, the X understood that every insult, every attempt at control, had failed. He had exposed himself fully to the wrong audience. Security officers now subtly moved closer, not because of threat, but in recognition that the dynamics in the space had altered. Mall management, previously just observing, now whispered among themselves, registering the authority emanating from the figure in white. The whispers of the crowd grew, and even those recording with their phones sensed the weight of the moment, though they could not fully articulate it. The X opened his mouth again, attempting one last assertion, one last claim of dominance. "You don't know what you're." He stopped abruptly. The words died in his throat. Because in that instant, it clicked. The calm, deliberate figure behind her was not merely a presence. He was authority incarnate, measured, unyielding, commanding. And he knew her. Not superficially, not casually. He knew her history, her strength, her value. He understood the balance she had earned for herself through years of struggle. His power didn't need to shout. It didn't need to strike. It simply existed, and the X was exposed, naked, vulnerable under the weight of it. His ego, once inflated, now crumbled quietly. The frantic gestures, the loud accusations, the desperate attempts to dominate, all rendered meaningless under the gaze of someone who wielded true control effortlessly. The crowd sensed it. The shoppers, the security, the whispering teens, the mall staff. They all recognized the shift even if they didn't understand its source. The X's dominance was gone. He had been publicly diminished, subtly, without anyone lifting a hand against him. A single, deliberate step from the observer drew attention back to him. A quiet, controlled pause. The X's voice faltered again. Panic replaced confidence. His chest heaved, his fingers twitched, searching for authority he no longer possessed. And then the X fully realized it. He realized that the calm, deliberate presence behind her was not just an observer, not just an influence. He realized who he had just insulted. The silence stretched. Not awkward, not uncertain, controlled. The X stood there, chest rising too fast now, eyes darting between her and the man in the white blazer. The name had landed in his mind like a dropped weight. Reputation, influence, power that didn't shout. And suddenly, his earlier confidence felt suicidal. The crowd sensed it too. The shift was no longer subtle. It was complete. The man in white adjusted his cuff once more. Not nervous, not impatient, just precise. His gaze never left the X. "You were saying," he said calmly. 3 words. No volume, no aggression. But the corridor felt smaller. The X swallowed. This is between me and her," he tried, forcing his voice steady. "This has nothing to do with you." The response came instantly. "It has everything to do with me." No anger, just certainty. A few heads in the crowd nodded without realizing they had. The X laughed again, but this time it broke halfway through. "You think because you wear an expensive suit you can." "Stop." The single word cut him off mid-sentence. The security guards, who had been hovering at a distance, straightened unconsciously. The mall manager lowered his phone. Even the teenagers recording lowered their devices slightly. The man in white stepped closer. Not invading, not touching, just entering the X's personal space enough to tilt the balance. "You've mistaken volume for power," he said evenly. "You've mistaken history for ownership. And you've mistaken her silence for weakness." Each sentence landed like a verdict. The X opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came out. "You built nothing," the man continued. "You controlled. You intimidated. You diminished." The X's jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about our relationship." A slight tilt of the head. "I know enough." A pause. Silence again. Weaponized. The crowd leaned in. Not physically. Emotionally. The X tried to recover. "She needed me. Everyone knows that. She had nothing before I. She had potential." The man interrupted calmly. "You feared it. That one struck." The X's eyes flickered. Not anger. Recognition. The woman stood quietly, breathing steady, hands relaxed at her sides. She wasn't hiding behind anyone. She wasn't shrinking. She wasn't asking to be saved. She was watching. And that unsettled him more than anything. "You're embarrassing yourself," the man in white said. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't cruel. It was factual. A low murmur ran through the crowd. The X felt it. The shift in loyalty. The subtle siding against him. "You don't get to talk to me like that," he snapped weakly. "I just did." Another pause. The silence was brutal. The X looked around, suddenly aware of the eyes on him. The phones. The whispers. The security presence. The mall manager observing. The performance had flipped. He wasn't the aggressor anymore. He was the spectacle. The man in white took one final half-step forward. "You will apologize." The words were calm. Deadly calm. The X blinked. "Excuse me." "You will apologize," he repeated. Publicly. Clearly. And without qualification. A laugh burst out of the X, desperate and loud. "You can't force me to do anything." A slight nod. "You're right," the man said. "I don't force. A beat. I remove." The word hung there. Cold. The X frowned. "Remove what?" The man's expression didn't change. "Access. Contracts. Invitations. Opportunities." The mall manager's eyes widened slightly. The security guards exchanged glances. The X stiffened. "You work in logistics," the man continued smoothly. "Regional supplier agreements. 3 major accounts. 2 pending renewals." The X's face drained. "How?" "One of those accounts," the man said gently, "answers to me." The crowd didn't fully understand the specifics. They didn't need to. The tone told them everything. "And the other 2," he continued, "value reputation." The X's breathing changed. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "I wouldn't." The man raised an eyebrow slightly. The silence returned. Longer this time. Crueler. "You publicly degrade a woman," he said calmly, "in a building partially funded by one of my holding groups. You threaten her. You claim ownership over her." The X's knees almost locked. "And you think there are no consequences?" The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. The X tried again, desperation rising. "This is insane. You're overreacting." "No," the man replied. "You miscalculated." A woman in the crowd murmured softly, "He's done." The X heard it. His ego cracked audibly now. He looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time that day. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't begging. She wasn't defending herself. She was calm. That destroyed him more than the threats. "You're really going to hide behind him?" he spat weakly. Her voice came for the first time in several minutes. Clear. Controlled. "I'm not hiding." The words were simple. but the way she said them erased years of intimidation. The man in white didn't interrupt, didn't rush, didn't rescue. He let her speak. That was power. The ex looked between them, cornered. You think you've won? He demanded. The response was immediate. She doesn't need to win, the man said. She just needs to be free of you. That landed harder than any insult. The ex's voice rose again, but now it trembled. You can't just destroy my life over a misunderstanding. The man stepped back slightly, giving space, but not relief. No, he said calmly. You're destroying it yourself. Silence again. The security guards were no longer pretending to casually observe. They were watching him, not her. Him. The crowd had shifted entirely now. The sympathy, the attention, the energy. It belonged to her. The ex wiped his forehead, sweat forming despite the cool air. Fine, he snapped. I'm sorry. The man didn't blink. That wasn't clear. The ex's jaw tightened. He glanced around, realizing the phones were still recording. He swallowed. I'm sorry, he said louder. The man tilted his head slightly. For what? The humiliation was complete now. For causing a scene. Silence. Long. Unforgiving. For what? The man repeated calmly. Did you do to her? The ex's lips trembled. I disrespected you, he muttered toward her. Louder. The crowd was utterly still. I disrespected you, he said, voice cracking. I tried to control you. I shouldn't have. There it was. Public. Recorded. Witnessed. The woman didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She just nodded once. And that quiet dignity felt heavier than revenge. The ex's shoulders sagged. It was over. He had been dismantled without a single shout, without a single threat screamed, without a single hand raised. The man in white studied him for a long moment. You will not contact her again, he said. The ex nodded quickly. You will not approach her. Another nod. You will not mention her name. Yes. And you will remember today. The ex didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence said everything. The man stepped slightly to the side, clearing a path. Dismissal. Not dramatic. Not loud. Final. The ex hesitated, humiliation burning through him. The crowd parted. Not for him. For the man in white. That subtle distinction crushed what remained of his ego. He walked away. Not victorious. Not angry. Small. The door slid open, closed behind him, and the corridor exhaled. The crowd slowly began to move again, whispers spreading like ripples across water. But the focus remained on the pair standing there. She turned slightly toward the man beside her. Not dependent. Not rescued. Acknowledging. Thank you, she said softly. His response was measured. You handled yourself. That mattered more than anything else. She wasn't saved. She was supported. The security guards relaxed. The mall manager retreated quietly. The phones lowered. But the man in white didn't look satisfied. He didn't look finished. His eyes followed the direction the ex had exited. Calculating. Assessing. The dismantling had been public. Precise. Surgical. But something in his expression suggested layers beneath what the crowd had just witnessed. Layers the ex hadn't even begun to comprehend. She noticed it. The slight tightening of his jaw. The stillness returning. What is it? She asked quietly. His gaze remained on the glass doors. He embarrassed you publicly, he said. A pause. He won't do that again. It wasn't reassurance. It was strategy. And in that moment, she understood something deeper. This wasn't just about humiliation. It wasn't just about apology. It was about correction, recalibration, permanent. The mall resumed its normal rhythm, but the energy around them remained charged. Because this wasn't just dominance. This was controlled destruction. And as the doors settled from the ex's exit, one truth lingered in the air like a promise not yet fulfilled. He wasn't done. The apology hung in the air. I disrespected you. I tried to control you. I shouldn't have. The words were spoken, but they weren't believed. The man in white didn't respond immediately. He studied him, not like an enemy, like a flawed investment. The ex shifted on his feet, eyes darting again. The silence stretched past comfort, past humiliation, into exposure. You said the words, the man finally replied calmly. Now mean them. The ex blinked. I do. No, came the quiet correction. You fear consequences. That is not the same thing. A faint ripple of agreement moved through the crowd. The ex felt it. The loss of sympathy. The complete inversion of power. You built your identity around being needed. The man continued evenly. Around making her feel small so you could feel significant. The ex's jaw tightened. You chose public humiliation, he went on. So now you will experience public clarity. Another pause. Weaponized again. You will state that she owes you nothing. The ex hesitated. The silence sharpened. He swallowed. She owes me nothing. Louder. She owes me nothing. His voice cracked. The mall corridor carried it. Recorded it. Sealed it. The man nodded once. And you will state that you were wrong. The ex looked around, panic rising again. Security was watching. The manager was watching. The crowd was watching. She was watching. I was wrong, he said. Not defiant. Not angry. Small. The man in white stepped slightly closer. You will never attempt to contact her again. And if you do, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. The ex whispered, I won't. Another long pause. But the dismantling wasn't finished. You pride yourself on image, the man said calmly. Your networking dinners. Your business circles. Your upcoming expansion into private supply contracts. The ex's eyes widened. How do you? Those rooms value discretion, he continued, ignoring the question. They value stability. A slight tilt of his head. They do not value men who create public disturbances and threaten women in shopping centers. The ex's breathing became shallow. You're bluffing. The man's expression didn't change. Am I? Silence. Cold. Precise. You applied last quarter for a partnership extension, he continued. You are waiting on approval. The ex's face drained completely. That committee, the man added gently, includes someone who answers to me. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't flashy. It was quiet annihilation. You can't ruin my career over this, the ex said, voice trembling. I don't ruin, he replied. I evaluate. A beat. And I do not invest in instability. The crowd didn't understand the specifics, but they understood the tone. This wasn't a threat. It was a verdict. The ex's shoulders dropped lower. This wasn't about embarrassment anymore. This was structural. His confidence, his work, his image, his future, all suddenly fragile. You've always believed consequences were optional, the man continued, because no one ever held you accountable. His eyes shifted briefly toward her. That changes today. The ex looked at her again. Desperate now. Say something, he demanded weakly. Tell him this is too much. She held his gaze. Steady. You were too much, she replied calmly. That was the final fracture. The crowd's loyalty was no longer subtle. It was absolute. A woman near the storefront folded her arms approvingly. A man shook his head at the ex. The shift was irreversible. The ex attempted one last surge. This isn't over, he muttered. The man in white didn't blink. You're correct, he said calmly. The ex's eyes lit briefly with misplaced hope. Then the sentence finished. It isn't. Silence fell again. Not chaotic. Controlled. You will leave, the man continued. You will reflect carefully. And you will pray your arrogance does not cost you more than today. There was no anger in it. That made it worse. Security subtly stepped closer now, not toward the man in white, toward the ex. The message was clear. The corridor no longer belonged to him. The space had rejected him. He glanced around. No allies. No sympathy. Only witnesses. His voice cracked one final time. Fine. The word was empty. He stepped backward. No one followed. No one defended. No one cared. The automatic doors slid open. He paused, perhaps expecting one last confrontation. None came. The man in white had already turned his attention away from him. Dismissal. Total. The doors closed behind the ex. And with that, his performance ended. The mall slowly resumed motion. But the energy around them remained altered. The destruction had been clean. Precise. Surgical. Not explosive. Permanent. She exhaled slowly. Not relief. Release. He turned toward her fully now. You handled yourself, he repeated. Not praise. Acknowledgement. She nodded slightly. I didn't need saving. I know. That was the difference. He hadn't rescued her. He had reinforced her power. But his gaze drifted briefly back toward the exit. Thoughtful. Measured. Calculating something unseen. She noticed. What are you thinking? He didn't answer immediately. The faintest tightening in his jaw. He will learn, he said finally. There was something in the tone. Not revenge. Correction. Strategic correction. This hadn't been emotional. It had been instructional. And men like him rarely delivered only one lesson. The mall lights reflected faintly against the white fabric of his blazer. Calm returned to the space. But beneath it, there was movement. Planning. She sensed it. The ex thought the humiliation was the punishment. He thought the apology was the cost. He was wrong. Because the man standing beside her did not believe in surface-level justice. He believed in balance. And balance, once disturbed, required full restoration. The corridor looked normal again. Shoppers walking, music playing, escalators moving. But something irreversible had just happened. A man had been publicly dismantled, his ego stripped, his leverage exposed, his authority erased, and the one he tried to break stood taller because of it. But as she glanced once more toward the doors he exited through, she realized something else. The dismantling had been deliberate, measured, incomplete, and as the man in white adjusted his cuff one final time, a silent promise lingered in the air. He wasn't done. The mall doors had closed behind him, but the lesson had not. Outside, the air felt thinner, colder. He walked fast at first, then faster, as if distance could undo humiliation, as if movement could erase witnesses. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again, then again. He stopped near the parking structure, jaw tight, hands shaking slightly as he finally looked down. 3 missed calls. One from his assistant, one from a partner, one from a number he knew too well. His stomach dropped. He answered the partner first. "What did you do?" came the sharp voice on the other end. He stiffened. "What are you talking about?" "There's a video circulating. Someone sent it to the board. You threatening a woman. In public. In one of the largest commercial centers in the district." His throat tightened. "It's being exaggerated." There was a pause. Then a cold response. "Is it?" Silence. "We're reviewing your conduct clause. I suggest you don't make this worse." The line went dead. His hand trembled. He told himself it was nothing. A temporary flare-up. Social media noise. It would fade. His phone buzzed again, this time from his assistant. He answered. "Sir, the supplier extension meeting scheduled next week has been postponed." "Postponed," he snapped. "Yes, indefinitely." His mouth went dry. "And 2 of your dinner confirmations have been canceled." A beat. They didn't give a reason. He didn't need one. The video was spreading. The apology. The confrontation. The way he had been reduced. Public clarity. He leaned against the concrete pillar of the parking structure, breathing shallow. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was supposed to dominate, to control the narrative, to leave her small. Instead, he had been dissected. Publicly. His phone vibrated again. A message this time. A screenshot. Him. Red-faced. Pointing. Yelling. And beneath it, comments. Disgusting. Imagine thinking you own someone. Who is he? The next screenshot hit harder. The apology clip. Clear audio. "She owes me nothing." His own voice. Cracking. His chest tightened. He felt it now. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Fear. Real fear. Back inside the mall, she stood beside the man in white near the glass balcony overlooking the lower floor. The crowd had thinned. The tension had softened. But something remained in the air. Completion. This was the emotional reset point. And if you're still here with us, watching this unfold, you already understand something important. Stories like this aren't just about drama. They're about power, accountability, and the quiet strength people build after being told they are nothing. If you believe strength doesn't always have to be loud, stay with Ari Love Beyond. Because this is where silence wins. She turned slightly toward him. "You knew this would happen," she said quietly. "I knew he would continue being himself," he replied. A subtle difference. He wasn't orchestrating chaos. He was allowing consequences. Outside, the ex tried calling one of his canceled dinner contacts. No answer. He tried another. Straight to voicemail. He texted a colleague. "Call me. Urgent." No reply. The world he thought he controlled was shifting under his feet. He replayed the moment in his mind. The calm voice. The measured words. "I evaluate." That line echoed. His image wasn't just bruised. It was unstable. And instability was expensive. He pushed away from the pillar and got into his car. The engine started, but he didn't move. His hands gripped the steering wheel as the realization finally settled fully into his bones. This wasn't revenge. This was correction. The man in white hadn't shouted, hadn't threatened, hadn't raised a hand. He had simply illuminated him. And in doing so, exposed everything. Another notification lit up his phone. An email. Subject line, "Review of conduct." He stared at it. Didn't open it. Didn't need to. His mind raced. How far would it go? Would clients pull back? Would partners distance themselves? Would friends quietly step away? He had built his reputation on control. And now he looked reckless. Volatile. Small. The worst part wasn't the financial implications. It was the psychological unraveling. He couldn't stop replaying her expression. She hadn't begged. She hadn't cried. She hadn't defended. She had simply stood, calm. That destroyed him more than the public apology, because it meant he had never truly owned her narrative. He had only bullied it. Inside the mall, the man in white checked his watch. "It's done," she said softly. He looked at her. "No," he corrected gently. "It's balanced." A subtle but critical difference. Outside, the ex finally opened the email. Policy violations. Public conduct concerns. Pending review. He felt the air leave his lungs. He wanted to blame someone. To rage. To fight. But the truth pressed heavier than anger. He had done this. No one forced him to yell. No one forced him to threaten. No one forced him to expose himself. He had chosen spectacle. And spectacle had consequences. His phone buzzed again. A message from someone he once considered close. "Bro, what were you thinking?" He didn't reply, because he didn't have an answer. For the first time in years, he wasn't in control. Not of the narrative. Not of perception. Not of outcome. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. The confident man he thought he was seemed distorted now. Thinner. Less certain. He thought humiliation would make him angry enough to fight back. Instead, it hollowed him. Back upstairs, she watched the lower level of the mall return to normal rhythm. Laughter. Music. Movement. Life continued. And she felt something unfamiliar. Not triumph. Not revenge. Closure. The man in white stood beside her, quiet as always. "You're free," he said simply. And for the first time, she believed it. Outside, the ex started the engine and finally drove away. But he didn't feel victorious. He didn't feel defiant. He felt exposed. And as the mall faded in his rearview mirror, one brutal truth settled into him completely. No one had ruined him. No one had sabotaged him. No one had attacked him. He had destroyed himself. The mall had returned to normal. Music drifted softly through the ceiling speakers. Escalators hummed. Shoppers carried bags and conversations as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But for those who had witnessed it, something lingered. A quiet recalibration. The space where humiliation once echoed now felt lighter. The crowd that had gathered earlier was gone. No phones raised. No whispers. Just polished floors reflecting evening lights and storefront windows glowing against the approaching night. She stood near the balcony railing overlooking the lower level, fingers resting gently on the cool glass. The adrenaline had faded. In its place was something steadier. Relief. Not because someone had defended her, but because she had not folded. Footsteps approached quietly. Measured. Familiar. He stopped beside her, leaving just enough space between them. Close, but not imposing. Present, but not claiming. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was different now. Soft. She exhaled slowly. "It's strange." "What is?" he asked. "I thought I would feel angrier." He glanced toward the floor below where life continued uninterrupted. "And how do you feel?" She considered the question carefully. Clear. That made him look at her. Not assessing. Not calculating. Seeing. "You didn't need me to speak," he said after a moment. "I know. And you didn't need saving." A faint smile touched her lips. "No." The acknowledgement sat between them like shared understanding. He hadn't stepped in because she was weak. He had stepped in because disrespect had crossed a line. There was a difference. The lights above flickered slightly as the mall transitioned toward evening mode. Shadows softened along the marble floor. "I used to believe him," she admitted quietly, "when he said I was nothing without him." His jaw tightened slightly at the memory, but his voice remained steady. "That belief was never yours," he said. "It was planted." She looked at him. "And you removed it?" "No," he replied calmly. "You did." That landed deeper than anything else he had said all day. She hadn't noticed when it happened. The slow shift. The rebuilding. The strengthening of something inside her that no longer reacted to his voice the way it once had. Today hadn't created her strength. It had revealed it. Below them, a child laughed near the fountain. A couple walked hand in hand. A store employee rolled down a security shutter for the evening. Life moved forward. She turned slightly toward him. "You didn't have to go that far." "I didn't go far," he said evenly. "I went exactly as far as necessary." There was no arrogance in it. Just precision. A soft breeze from the entrance carried the faint scent of evening air through the corridor. For the first time since the confrontation, her shoulders fully relaxed. He noticed. "You're lighter," he observed. "I feel lighter." Another pause. Not heavy. Comfortable. She studied his white blazer, still immaculate despite everything that had unfolded. The contrast between calm authority and controlled restraint lingered around him like an invisible shield. "Why did you wait?" she asked suddenly. He understood the question immediately. "Because you didn't ask for help. And if I had, I would have stepped in sooner." There it was. Not dominance. Not possession. Respect. She looked down briefly, then back up at him. "Thank you," she said again, softer this time. He gave a slight nod. "You stood your ground." The compliment meant more than protection ever could. They began walking slowly toward the exit together. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just steady. As they passed the storefront where the confrontation had peaked, there was no trace of it left. No memory on the floor. No echo in the walls. Only the quiet proof that moments of reckoning pass, but growth remains. Near the entrance, the evening sky had deepened into rich shades of blue. The city lights outside flickered awake. He paused before the doors. "You don't owe anyone an explanation for your growth," he said. She nodded. "And you don't owe anyone your smallness." That made her smile fully this time. The automatic doors slid open. Cool night air brushed against her face. For years, she had walked through doors feeling diminished, questioning herself, carrying someone else's voice inside her head. Tonight felt different. Not because he stood beside her, but because she no longer felt the need to shrink. They stepped outside together. Cars passed. Streetlights glowed. The world continued, indifferent to what had just transformed inside her. He turned slightly toward her. "Where to?" he asked. She looked ahead, not behind. Forward. And for the first time, that word felt real. He had told her she was nothing. But that night, she realized she had always been more. If this story reminded you that strength doesn't have to shout, if you've ever been told you were less than you are, then you already understand why stories like this matter. Stay with Ari Love Beyond, where silence holds power, dignity wins, and love is never about control.